In recent years, the Kremlin has crafted an alluring image for the world to see. Picture this: Vladimir Putin, standing tall on a nuclear icebreaker, his eyes fixed on the vast, icy wilderness of the Arctic. He passionately proclaims that Russia is entering a golden age, rich with untold resources of oil and natural gas. State-run media inundates viewers with vibrant images of Russian flags planted at the North Pole, sparkling liquefied natural gas facilities, and grand declarations about a shipping route set to rival the Suez Canal, alongside imposing military bases that dare to challenge NATO. But beneath this carefully curated facade lies a chilling reality. A harrowing article from the Moscow Times, dated October 15, 2025, unveils the stark contrast hidden just kilometers from those gleaming facilities. Around 2.5 million Russian citizens and over 260,000 indigenous people find themselves not celebrating a golden era, but fighting to survive in a vast, frozen wasteland. Plummeting temperatures plummet to -40 degrees Celsius, where heating pipes threaten to burst and apartment buildings stand on the brink of collapse, leaving power lines dangling precariously. The myths of Arctic prosperity are shattering under the weight of despair and cold. While Putin siphons off trillions to fulfill his imperial ambitions and flex his muscle against the West, he neglects the very people who inhabit the Siberian expanse, leaving them to languish in a miserable existence. This isn't an empire, it's a graveyard of ideals, a locale abandoned by a regime that has forsaken its own. To understand this betrayal beyond glossy propaganda, one must confront the harsh data. While Moscow fills its coffers with the wealth extracted from the Arctic, the land's inhabitants sink deeper into poverty and decay. Known officially as the Arctic region of the Russian Federation, this territory is one of the richest natural resource deposits on Earth. Official statistics reveal that over 80% of Russia's natural gas and nearly 20% of its oil are sourced from these frozen territories. Enormous LNG facilities on the Yamal Peninsula and vast oil fields in Siberia continuously pump wealth into state-controlled giants like Gazprom and Rosneft, financing the Kremlin's agenda while the locals struggle for warmth and sustenance. Where is the hope for the 2.5 million souls laboring on the land that feeds these riches? Economic analyses indicate an alarming reality: their quality of life falls drastically below the national average. They endure lower income levels, restricted access to healthcare, and inadequate educational provisions. The once proud cities of Norilsk, Vorkuta, and Murmansk have decayed into relics of their former glory, filled with rusting pipelines, crumbling structures, and blackouts. As the Kremlin extracts every ounce of wealth from beneath the Arctic, it has completely abandoned the people who reside above it. Reports amplify the horrors of systematic neglect. Each winter, aging infrastructure falters against the severe cold. Heating pipes shatter, leaving thousands without warmth, their homes freezing into eerie ice sculptures. Recognizing this isn't merely a series of accidents, it's a consequence of extreme disregard and moral bankruptcy from a regime that hoards wealth while its citizens endure basic survival struggles. The scientific community warns of a catastrophic future. It's estimated that more than 40% of the Arctic infrastructure is at high risk due to thawing permafrost. Buildings begin to shift, roads warp, and pipelines, once sturdy, now threaten disastrous ruptures. This isn't just a question of probability, it's a ticking time bomb, waiting for its moment to unleash chaos. A haunting preview of this impending collapse occurred in May 2020 in Norilsk, the northernmost industrial city on the planet. A massive diesel fuel tank ruptured due to the unstable ground beneath it, unleashing over 21,000 tons of toxic fuel into the nearby waters and soil, a haunting reminder of the price paid for negligence. The indigenous communities, the original stewards of these lands, are bearing the brunt of this devastation. More than 260,000 individuals from groups such as the Nenets and Chukchi find their way of life threatened as their habitats are decimated. The solutions to tribal survival are vanishing as Russian energy giants encroach upon their territories. As sacred lands are transformed into pipelines and industrial endeavors pollute the pristine wilderness, the very essence of their culture erodes. While the regime claims to protect their rights, it stifles their voices and takes their resources, leaving communities rife with poverty and despair. Alcoholism and joblessness run rampant, breeding deep-seated resentment that simmers just beneath the surface. This feeling of abandonment isn't confined to the indigenous peoples. Approximately 2.5 million Russians, hailing from diverse backgrounds, are equally neglected. Once seen as pioneers in the harsh Arctic landscape, they now grapple daily with the brutal contrast of state propaganda against their grim realities. The promises of empowerment and modernity have faded, leaving behind only echoes of lost hope. How long until simmering discontent transforms into an unstoppable wave of resistance? The people have witnessed the betrayal of their homeland. As despair teeters on the edge of something more explosive, the bleak truth of life in the Arctic becomes undeniable, trapped in a struggle, defined by survival, against a regime intent on sacrificing its own for the sake of glory. In the Arctic region of the Russian Federation, a shocking disparity unfolds. Beneath the veneer of prosperity created by the Kremlin lies a grim reality. Trillions of dollars in wealth are funneled directly to Moscow, while over 2.5 million souls, who inhabit the lands that produce this bounty, face despair and neglect. As we delve into this harsh truth, we uncover an unsettling statistic: more than 80% of Russia's total natural gas and 20% of its oil production emerges from these frozen territories. Here, grand LNG facilities litter the Yamal Peninsula, and state-controlled moguls like Gazprom and Rosneft thrive, their profits surging as they pump wealth into the heart of Moscow. This revenue fuels not just the Kremlin's ambitions, but also the ongoing military campaigns abroad. Yet what does this mean for the men and women toiling under sub-zero conditions? The answer is a profound tragedy. These communities wrestle with a quality of life that starkly contrasts the Russian average. They suffer from lower incomes, limited healthcare access, and inadequate educational opportunities. Cities once celebrated as Soviet triumphs, like Norilsk, Vorkuta, and Murmansk, now stand as hollow shells, riddled with rusting pipelines and crumbling infrastructure. With every drop of wealth extracted from beneath the icy surface, the regime's grip on reality loosens, dismissing the very people on whom it relies. Darkness envelopes these cities, and echoes of power outages resonate through neighborhoods, reminiscent of a forgotten time. Amid this, an uneasy tension simmers, leading us to question, how long can the people endure this state of abandonment? The statistics serve as a haunting reminder of what happens when an empire prioritizes riches over its citizens. Frustration and anger brew beneath the surface, hinting at an inevitable confrontation. As winter's icy grip tightens and the skies darken, we wonder, what lies ahead for those left to survive in this harsh, unforgiving wilderness? In this reality, the warming Arctic climate threatens more than just the environment. The infrastructure, once robustly built, is decaying. Permafrost thawing poses dire risks to homes and livelihoods, leading to infrastructure failures that could spark a catastrophe at any moment. When will the simmering resentment among the 2.5 million inhabitants break free from the ice? The alarm bells ring louder as we learn from recent assessments: over 40% of the existing infrastructure in this region hangs by a thread. Roads buckle, buildings shift, and essential services like heating become intermittent. The question then becomes not if disaster will strike, but when. Will those in power acknowledge the plight of the Arctic inhabitants before it's too late, or will they continue to ignore the cries of a land and its people, lost in a frozen hell? In the heart of the Arctic, where once proud Soviet cities like Norilsk, Vorkuta, and Murmansk reigned, lies a haunting reality. These cities, once symbols of triumph, now stand as ruins. Crumbling buildings, rusting pipelines, and endless power outages weave a stark narrative of neglect. As the Kremlin siphons off enormous wealth from beneath the frozen surface, it has turned its back on the people who inhabit this bleak landscape. Every winter, the merciless cold creeps in, plunging temperatures to a bone-chilling -40. The aging heating and electrical systems, relics of the Soviet era, seem to crumble like the infrastructure around them. Residents find themselves trapped in a bitter struggle for warmth and light, enduring days and even weeks without basic services. Bursting heating pipes turn homes into ice sculptures, while darkness wraps the towns in a suffocating silence. This suffering isn't an act of nature, it stems from a systemic betrayal. For decades, the regime has prioritized military might and lavish spectacles in Moscow over the well-being of its citizens. The stark reality is these communities are housing the remnants of dreams crushed under the weight of moral decay and resource mismanagement. Reports reveal a startling truth: over 40% of the region's infrastructure is on the brink of collapse, jeopardized by the thawing permafrost. What does this impending disaster entail? The very ground that supports buildings is melting away, causing walls to crack and foundations to fail. Roads buckle, and critical pipelines bend dangerously close to bursting. This scenario is no longer hypothetical, it looms ominously on the horizon, threatening catastrophe. The most chilling glimpse of what lies ahead occurred in May 2020. In Norilsk, the northernmost industrial city on the planet, a catastrophic failure of a diesel fuel tank ignited chaos. The ground crumbled beneath it, spilling over 21,000 tons of toxic diesel into nearby rivers and soil, a grim reminder of the environmental disasters waiting to unfold. But this is just the beginning. As the regime ignores its own people, challenges mount, and a question lingers: will the Arctic's silent population rise against the neglect that surrounds them? Amid the brutal conditions of the Arctic, an urgent crisis bubbles beneath the surface. In May 2020, Norilsk, the northernmost industrial city in the world, became the focal point of an environmental catastrophe. A notorious diesel tank at a thermal power plant owned by Norilsk Nickel ruptured. Beneath the ice, the permafrost betrayed its weight, and over 21,000 tons of toxic diesel surged into the rivers, creating one of the most catastrophic spills in Arctic history. This was no mere accident, it echoed a grim reality. The aftermath of this disaster sent shockwaves through the communities indigenous to these lands. Over 260,000 individuals from groups like the Nenets, Evenks, and Chukchi, the true custodians of this territory for millennia, found their lives crumbling amidst the rubble of negligence. With their habitats ravaged, their traditions threatened, they embodied the silent victims of a regime keen on extracting wealth at any cost. Their existence, once woven into the fabric of tundra and ice, is now overshadowed by the insatiable appetite of oil and gas corporations like Gazprom and Rosneft, encroaching into their sacred lands. Yet, the devastation extends beyond the physical realm. Pipelines slice through migration routes for reindeer, while toxic exploration poisons the rivers they rely on. The land, once vibrant with life, now bears the mark of indifference. A thick, black sludge replaces the pristine, icy beauty. This crisis is not just an environmental calamity, it is a calculated strike against a culture, a way of life that has thrived for centuries. The Kremlin's promises of protecting these indigenous peoples' rights ring hollow. In reality, they fashion a narrative to silence dissent, appointing superficial representatives to councils while stripping these communities of their means to survive. Education and healthcare remain perilously inadequate. Rates of alcoholism and unemployment deepen the despair, feeding a growing bitterness. As they grapple with the consequences of a regime intent on ignoring their existence, the anger among these populations brews, hinting at an explosive potential for resistance against a system that has betrayed them. What must one endure when trapped in a land rich with resources but devoid of hope? The chilling answer lies in their everyday reality. In a landscape filled with crumbling dreams, there lies a bitter betrayal. The Kremlin presents a facade of support for indigenous rights while stripping these communities of their land and resources. They dangle the carrot of prosperity before the indigenous peoples, yet the truth is stark: rampant unemployment, poor healthcare, and limited education simmer beneath the surface, igniting a deep-seated anger. This rage is not confined to the native populations alone. Approximately 2.5 million Russian citizens in the Arctic also grapple with despair. They live in a region portrayed by the regime as prosperous and thriving, but reality reveals a forgotten wasteland plagued by hopelessness. Can you imagine living in a place that promises wealth but delivers only despair? Every winter, as chilling winds howl through the streets, residents confront the bitter truth: the wealth extracted from their lands only fuels the luxurious lives of a distant elite. These promises of better futures remain unfulfilled, leading many to ask, when will enough be enough? This brewing discontent foreshadows an explosive potential for rebellion. Once upon a time, families built their lives in these harsh yet beautiful lands, having felt a sense of purpose and support from the state. During the Soviet era, hope ran high as the government invested in their communities. But when that support vanished, many sought a new path, leading to an unsettling reality where dreams were drowned in growing disillusion. With Vladimir Putin's rise, fresh promises of a revived nation filled the air. The Arctic was to become a renewed source of pride. Many believed it would herald a golden age. Instead, years passed, and hope crumbled like the decaying infrastructure around them. Despair seeped into their lives as the riches of their homeland remained out of reach, vanishing into Moscow's coffers rather than enhancing their cities or livings. Imagine the anguish of watching every promise fade, heating pipes burst, and buildings falter while billions flow from under their feet. The harsh sound of winter ice cracking underfoot won't echo the ambitions laid before them. Instead, it serves as a reminder of lives unlived and dreams abandoned. This is the true cost of a regime that claims greatness while forsaking its own citizens. As we venture deeper into this grim narrative, the stark reality of neglect paints a haunting picture. How much longer can this cycle of betrayal persist before the desire for change becomes too great to contain? More chilling than the biting Arctic winds is the knowledge that the voiceless spirits of these lands are rising, ready to demand justice from a history that has long forgotten them. Imagine the bitter sting of shattered dreams in a frozen wasteland, where hope melted faster than Arctic permafrost. People clung to promises of revival, believing their harsh world would warm with prosperity, only to face a blizzard of neglect. What if the fortune beneath their feet was fueling distant luxuries and battles, leaving them to shiver in ruin? Shocking as it seems, trillions spirited away not to fix burst pipes spraying icy mist or crumbling walls cracking like thunder, but to elite vaults and senseless wars. As massive energy ventures exploded with potential, millions dreamed of revival. Cities glistening with new life, kids thriving in modern hubs, futures unfolding brighter than aurora lights. Yet, hope twisted into icy betrayal. Years blurred by, wealth gushing out like untamed rivers, yet zero poured back. No warm fixes for pipes rupturing in -40 winds, spewing frosty vapors. No rebirth for apartments groaning under rotted beams, dust-choked ruins sinking into mud. Schools and clinics? Echoes of decay, walls weeping mildew, air thick with neglect's stench. Instead, these riches funnel straight to Moscow tycoons' coffers, fancy pads in fancy towns overseas, and drown in pointless global gambles. Ukraine's quagmire. Arctic aggression ramps escalating. Locals witnessed firsthand, their turf's bounty incinerated in faraway clashes or wasted on glistening elites. Oh, how it stokes a firestorm of wrath, raw injustice, utter desertion. Battling sub-zero blasts isn't the half of it, feeling erased by central overlords hits deeper, branding them outcasts in their own nation. Their woes vanish from flashy Kremlin tales. Please vanish, swallowed by distant, indifferent ears. Paired with Ukraine's fallout, wrecked families, barren shelves, slashed paychecks, it brews a volcano of unrest. One side, war's carnage claiming youths or scarring innocence. Other side, empty larders, hollow wallets. Apex, fat cats feasting on plundered spoils. Classic powder keg, echoed in revolutions past, and here, brewing in icy depths, igniting under feet of despair. So, why gamble so recklessly? Why dangle over such chasms, hoarding for vanity while homelands crumble? The puzzle unravels in obsession's shadow. What dark drive propels this Arctic titan to drain dry, sparking rage that could topple thrones? Critics say it's ego-fueled folly, humiliating foes with bluff grandeur, but at what cost to kin? Unexpected turn, this greed might birth its own downfall, alliances shattering like thin ice. In a staggering twist of fate, Vladimir Putin's obsession with power is risking the lives of 2.5 million Russian citizens in the Arctic. While the Kremlin channels billions into a military spectacle, those left behind in towns like Norilsk and Vorkuta are facing chilling threats, facing the prospect of freezing to death because of burst heating pipes. This is not merely misallocation, this is a profound strategic blunder. Why is the Kremlin prioritizing military expansion over humanitarian needs? The answer lies in Putin's fervent desire to assert dominance in the Arctic, a region now competing with major shipping routes like the Suez Canal due to climate change. As ice melts, the Northern Sea route has transformed into a focal point for geopolitical maneuvering, capturing Putin's ambitions of a higher standing in global trade. This obsession has prompted massive investment in infrastructure, ports, icebreaker fleets, and formidable military bases geared toward establishing Russia as the gatekeeper of this critical passage between Asia and Europe. However, it's the looming standoff with NATO that adds a sinister edge to Putin's Arctic venture. The region isn't just a treasure trove of resources, it serves as a strategic military stronghold, housing a significant portion of Russia's nuclear submarine fleet. As NATO nations bolster their presence, Putin is essentially transforming the Arctic into a front line for a new Cold War. Think about this, billions are spent on tracking NATO submarines and constructing defenses against a perceived threat while the very infrastructure supporting Russian citizens crumbles. The irony is stark. While Putin chases dreams of grandeur and military might, the reality of life for those in the Arctic is chilling. They endure daily struggles, cracked walls, powerless homes, and a complete abandonment by those in Moscow. The dissonance between the Kremlin's propaganda and the stark lives of these citizens could ignite a desperate uprising fueled by sense of betrayal. Will the simmering discontent of 2.5 million ignored souls be the spark that ignites a revolution in these frozen lands? The Kremlin is investing heavily in military expansion to secure the Arctic, portraying an image of strength against a perceived Western threat. However, a tragic irony lies just a short distance away. While Putin channels immense resources into hunting NATO submarines far from home, 2.5 million of his own citizens in cities like Norilsk and Vorkuta are at risk of freezing to death due to neglected infrastructure. This scenario reveals a profound failure, a regime that overlooks the fundamental needs of its people while confronting imaginary foes. As Putin claims dominion over the Arctic, he unwittingly sacrifices both the land and its inhabitants to fulfill imperial dreams. The impressive military buildup captured in state propaganda belies the reality, a facade masking profound decay intensified by the war in Ukraine. As Putin diverts elite troops and resources to distant battlefields, he inadvertently leaves the Arctic, once a strategic stronghold, vulnerable. In the past, Russia's Arctic Command boasted highly trained units equipped with modern weaponry. But since the onset of the conflict in Ukraine, many of these troops have been redeployed, suffering substantial losses. The current Arctic garrison is filled with inadequately trained recruits and aging reserve soldiers, creating a chink in the region's defense. Visualize the stark contrast between the Kremlin's power projection and the grim reality facing those in the Arctic. As soldiers gear up for a phantom war, the people of Norilsk watch their homes succumb to the icy grip of neglect and despair. How much longer can this two-faced approach continue before it ignites anger among the very citizens it claims to protect? In this frozen landscape, where harsh winds howl and temperatures plummet, one must ask, when will the voices of the forgotten echo loud enough to challenge a regime that has prioritized imperial fantasies over the welfare of its own people? In the Arctic, a stark reality clashes with a glossy narrative crafted by the Kremlin. Beneath a facade of power, there lies the truth of betrayal, a nightmare for 2.5 million citizens trapped in a frozen hell, left at the mercy of crumbling infrastructure and frigid winters. Their plight begins with the chilling sensation of impending collapse, as heating systems threaten to fail under extreme cold, manifesting the very fear of homelessness as temperatures plummet to -40 degrees Celsius. As the chilling winds howl outside, these individuals remain inside dilapidated apartments, where sudden bursts of steam reveal the fragility of their existence. The Kremlin might trumpet images of military prowess and vast resources, but for those living in the Arctic, the promise of prosperity has turned into a bitter betrayal. Instead of stability, they face an unending struggle for survival, grappling with chaos that robs them of hope. While the state invests heavily in grand projects that benefit a select few, the very people who allow this wealth to flow are cast aside, mere shadows in a spectacle of national pride. Those watching as billions extracted from their lands fill the coffers of oligarchs and fuel conflicts abroad are not champions of a resurgence. Instead, they feel like forgotten pawns in a grand game, a social time bomb burdened with anger and shame. As Putin prepares to confront external threats, the internal legitimacy of his regime crumbles. He claims to safeguard Russia, yet millions of his own people languish in despair, deprived of essential needs. This hypocrisy resonates loudly, tearing at the fabric of loyalty that once tethered the populace to their leader. People recall a time when the state cared for its citizens, but those memories now feel like a distant echo eclipsed by a stark realization every promise made over 2 decades lies in tatters. The question remains, how long before this underlying discontent ignites a rebellion against the regime? In a land where hopes and dreams are buried in ice and neglect, the answer approaches with every freezing breath. The reality is a fracture, deepening with each passing day, as the world watches with bated breath, wondering when the calm facade will shatter into chaos. It's a timeline fraught with peril, yet the spark is undeniable. The people of the Arctic, once proud and hopeful, now stand on the precipice, caught between an oppressive regime and an unbearable existence. This is more than an infrastructure crisis, it's a betrayal of the very essence of what it means to be a citizen in a country that claims to stand tall against the world. Only time will tell when the cry for justice will pierce the icy grip of silence and resonate across the barren lands of despair. In a grand play of deceit and tragedy, Vladimir Putin stands as the self-proclaimed master of the Arctic, portraying a powerful Russia that dominates the icy expanse. State media broadcasts images of Putin on a nuclear icebreaker, gazing across the vast whiteness of the Arctic, while narrating tales of a golden age rich in oil and natural gas. Yet, just a stone's throw from this polished narrative, in cities like Norilsk and Vorkuta, 2.5 million citizens grapple with a chilling reality, teetering on the brink of survival. This is the story of a catastrophic neglect, where Putin's grand ambitions come at a harrowing cost. His own people are abandoned to a frozen wasteland. Trapped in frozen homes, countless citizens risk freezing to death when heating pipes burst in temperatures plunging to -40 degrees Celsius. Here lies the stark absurdity: an empire that fortifies its defenses against imaginary threats, while neglecting the very citizens who suffer daily from shattered infrastructure and crumbling buildings. While the Kremlin flaunts military might and strategic bases, a deeper vulnerability festers beneath the surface. The Arctic Command, once filled with elite units, now sees its ranks depleted as soldiers are dispatched to the battered front lines of Ukraine, leaving the Arctic defense vulnerable. This is a grim outcome of prioritizing imperial ambitions over the well-being of Russian citizens. As the Russian elite reaps billions, the citizens of the Arctic endure a starkly different existence. Deeming their struggles inconsequential, the regime siphons wealth from this frigid expanse. Yet, amidst the cruelty of systemic neglect, an underlying sense of anger brews among the populace. Each passing winter amplifies despair, heating failures, power outages, and collapsing buildings, every echo of their plight amplifying the feeling of betrayal by a government that promises much but delivers little. The duality of Putin's narrative reveals itself. He champions a renewed Russia while sabotaging the very foundation upon which its future rests. With each passing day, the resilience of Arctic communities gives way to desperation, setting the stage for a potential uprising fueled by a profound sense of injustice. The Kremlin's bluster, built on images of strength, falters when juxtaposed against the cries of ordinary people left to suffer. This is a ticking time bomb, a betrayal of unimaginable proportions, a reflection of a leader's abandonment of those in dire need. The harsh reality of the Arctic blurs the line between power and vulnerability, casting doubt on Putin's far-reaching ambitions. The cries of the forgotten resonate louder than the regime's propaganda, a haunting reminder that the ice beneath their feet is melting, not just from climate change, but from the icy grip of neglect. As the sun sets in the polar darkness, the future remains uncertain for the 2.5 million souls stranded in this desolate land. What can remain of a nation that chooses to ignore the agonizing cries of its own? Can an empire built on lies and isolation endure? What will emerge from the ashes of forgotten promises, rebellion, resignation, or perhaps a tumultuous awakening? In these frigid depths, the story unwinds, revealing not just an empire's ambitions, but also a chilling betrayal of humanity, a tale of survival amid the frigid grip of neglect, where hope still flickers like a dying fire beneath the snow. Will history repeat itself, or will the ice below crack to reveal a revolution waiting to rise from the cold?